Hello, and welcome to the How to Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. And now a moment for our sponsors. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast. Today I'm here with Connor Pera. You're an acquisition entrepreneur and you've acquired your first business. You've got a couple of, little side project things too. We were talking about one of them. I love acquisition entrepreneurs. I want to learn your story, kind of what got you into this. Kind of give us your origin. Where did you start? What made the move to being the entrepreneur? When did you realize you were an entrepreneur?
That's a great question. It wasn't until pretty recent. I mean, I wasn't one of those people who grew up like knowing that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I've always had a lot of respect for entrepreneurs and sort of like the business tycoons, if you will. But yeah, I never really kind of thought of that as my path until more recently in my career. But I grew up in Northeast Ohio, in a suburban part of Cleveland. Went to college at Penn State, worked in financial services for a few years after college in the Philly area, and then went to business school in Chicago. And then a job opportunity coming out of business school brought me down here to Nashville. But it was really in business school when I started to. That was when I first got exposed to the idea of acquisition entrepreneurship and thought, that's really cool. Prior to that, my sort of I did kind of always want to run a business, run my own thing someday, but I just sort of thought unless you were Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or one of those type of guys, the best way to do that was to work your way up the corporate ladder in a really traditional sense. So that was sort of the template that I had in mind in business school, but acquisition entrepreneurship kind of like shattered that idea for me. It was like, oh, well, yeah, smaller company, but you can actually go out and run your own thing earlier in your career, and you don't have to come up with some groundbreaking technology to be your own boss and run a decent sized business and make a great living hopefully and have a great life. So I kind of thought, wow, that's really cool. I think I'd like to do that someday, but I don't think I was ready at the time to take the leap into acquisition entrepreneurship straight out of business school. So came down here to Nashville for a job working in CPG marketing. But it was sort of, during COVID, I was working from home 90+% of the time. And I kind of had, some time to think about like other projects I wanted to get into to sort of scratch that entrepreneurial itch and started a vending business back in 2021 and just got really excited by that. I mean, I still run that business and it's really, really tiny business that I do everything for. But I think just like we were talking earlier, like it just very tangibly introduced me to the concept of being able to go out into the marketplace, create value, and then sort of have like your income or a source of income that was relatively untethered from your time, or certainly from a traditionally structured way to spend your time. So vending is a little less. It's definitely less passive than I think a lot of people portray it on social media, but it is pretty flexible in the sense that you don't have to be at the machine collecting money and credit cards from people to be able to make money. So anyway, so that whole notion of being able to deploy capital and deploy assets that generate cash flow into the marketplace and not needing permission from someone who was a senior corporate executive to go do that was a really empowering experience for me. And so that sort of started to really, I would say, shift things in my mind from this was the whole acquisition entrepreneurship path being something that I was interested in, but maybe I'll look into it later, to like I think I definitely want to do this next. And then at that point it was just a matter of kind of trying to figure out how to make it happen. And for me, a lot of that was done through just through networking, through talking to people, kind of hearing their journeys and their stories, consuming a lot of content. Like I was all over the place on like podcasts like this and following all the influencers in the space and on Twitter and stuff. So I think I started to really just, make that whole world kind of a separate part of my existence, of my identity, and got super into it. And then honestly, like I decided to do a self-funded part-time search while I was working full-time, and it really just kind of snowballed pretty organically from me like being interested in the space to like, there was a lot of steps in between. So I don't want to say like it was not by any means easy, but because it just was something I was always really interested in, and it just always sort of felt like play to me to go like look at business acquisition entrepreneur or opportunities, like look at deals and talk to brokers and lawyers and bankers. Like that was all like very fun for me. So it kind of very organically snowballed from something I was interested in to being at the closing table and then really starting to freak out like, okay, what am I doing? But here we are. So
The dog that chases the car and when you finally caught one, right?
yeah,
"Well, what do I do now?"
exactly. It was exactly that experience for me. Like the week before closing, I was like, "Oh man, I've been like trying to do this for a while now, and here it is." And like now, I don't know what to do.
Now you're the CEO.
So
It's interesting
yeah,
that
yeah.
I would have saved so much time and so much money had somebody even uttered the word acquisition entrepreneurship out of college. Like, I have an MBA and they didn't talk about it. I did it later in life, so it wasn't like I did my I'm 52, but it's not like I went to got my I think I got my bachelor's in, like, around 97, right? I didn't go straight into college. I didn't get my master's degree until I think 2007, but they didn't talk about it then. I had an MBA in marketing, they didn't bring it up. I would have saved a lot of money and a lot of time because if you look at all the business I had that were successful, I often forget about how many I started that we shut down within 6 months because it just didn't work, right? People weren't
Hmm.
interested, or we thought something would be cool and the market didn't want it, or, "Wow, this is way more regulated than we thought it was gonna be." Everything from e-commerce platforms, I actually spent probably close to $1,000,000 trying to launch an online dating service at one point in my life.
Well, you might have been just a little too early on that. So
Anyway, so I love that you got to go the path you did, right? I grew up in an entrepreneur family. My father was a workaholic and always had side gigs, from wood shops to when I was little, I think he rebuilt Mustangs in our garage, like Mustang cars. And when I got old enough to work with him, he owned a painting business on the side. He worked a 40-hour a week. But I always learned if you wanted something, just go work a side gig and make some extra cash and go get it. But like I said, starting so many different things and like failing at them gave me some resilience and some lessons learned. But nobody said, "Hey, why don't you just go buy something that's already working, already profitable, already has market share, people like it."
well, I do think there's something though to the whole notion of, and I've certainly experienced this over the last year and a half or so, being a full-time entrepreneur, like some lessons you just have to learn in the marketplace, and you just like have to take your beatings. So I think in a lot of ways, like there aren't really any shortcuts to learning some of the lessons that running a business that you need to learn to be successful at running a business. And I'm certainly no expert on doing that, but I do think like you can intellectually understand a business situation or problem or strategy as well as you want until you're like in it, experiencing it firsthand. It's totally different. So
I can
I,
agree
I
with that.
think that
Yeah.
yeah, the whole notion of having to just sort of pay your dues, however that unfolds, it's part of the process for everyone, I think. So yeah.
People ask me like what I'm looking for now on acquisition, and I always tell them one of the criteria is it has to have a pretty healthy profit margin, and a lot of industries just don't. And so I don't look at those
Mhm.
industries and they're like, well, if the company's been running well and it's profitable, why does it need to have 15, 20, 25% profit margin? And I always say, well, I don't think that my ego is what it used to be. I don't think I'm going to step in and run a company as well in the first few months as somebody that just sold it and has been running for 30 years. To say, most
Mhm.
of these young entrepreneur guys, they go in and it's like, I'm going to improve this and this and this. And yeah, it's only making 10% profit margin within the first 6 months. I'm going to be at 20% profit margin. I kind of let that go a while back thinking there's going to be things about any business. If somebody's been running for 20, 30 years and they hand it over to you, there's going to be things you just don't know. Right. Just saying.
Mhm.
And so I always want a little room to mess up. That's why, show me something that's got a 15, 20 or better percent profit margin so that if I make a, mistake that hits the company by 5 or 10%, it's not okay, now I got to pump cash in this thing because it's dying.
Yeah, no, I mean, I could have used that advice. I mean, thankfully, I bought a profitable business and we're growing. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it never hurts to have more profit margin. I mean, it's kind of the game we're all playing. But you're exactly right. I mean, that's been a challenge, and certainly I'm sort of like in the middle of it right now, but experiencing that sort of J curve phenomenon of you take a business over and it immediately becomes less profitable because there's things you want to invest in or change or do differently. And it's funny, some things I've changed, like I would have saved myself a lot of time by just like listening to the seller about whether or not certain, for me it's been mostly like marketing and sales efforts, but like certain sort of channels or approaches where he was always just really good at like sussing out whether or not something was going to be a waste of time or not. And 30 years of experience will give you that sort of sixth sense. And for me, I was kind of like, but I think it'll work. And then I just had to do it for like 6 months and be like, you know what? He was right. I should have just listened. But yeah, so I'm kind of in the middle of that. Super fortunate that from a top line standpoint, things are going really well. But yeah, definitely experiencing the lower than previous ownership profitability. Some of that has to do with debt service and just some of the structural sort of changes, but some of it is just lack of experience and efficiency in deploying capital. And so that's the kind of thing that I need to continue to work on and continue to improve. So
So I don't think we ever said what you want. So tell me about the company and well, tell us what you acquired, what you're running now, and then we'll get
yeah.
into kind of what did the process look like, and then we'll get into the story of it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I run a commercial printing business called the Print Authority here in Brentwood, Tennessee, which is just outside Nashville. We are a full service commercial printing B2B commercial printing business. So we do everything from ink on paper, business cards, marketing materials, brochures, flyers, books, booklets, to banners and signs, 2D primarily. We don't really do any 3D signage, and promo and apparel and all kinds of stuff. But we primarily specialize in multi-location outsourced printing services. So what that means is we work with multi-location businesses, oftentimes franchises, typically like small to medium-sized franchisors, and we're the recommended print vendor for franchisees. And so we provide their franchisees with a portal that they can go in and log in and order all their branded merchandise and necessary print materials that they go through just as a franchisee or general manager of a store or territory. So that's what we specialize in. I really like that from as a sort of investor prior to having any experience in the industry. I really like that model because the revenue is much more reoccurring in nature through those relationships. The downside is those relationships take time to develop and build, and the sales cycle is longer. So, but once you get in with one of those relationships, it typically, provided that you do a good job, it's a bit stickier. So really like that, and definitely super bullish on web to print in general. But we also do a lot of local B2B work. I would say our web to print business is probably about a little over half of our business is web to print work, and we work with customers that are all over the country. So west of the Rockies is challenging just from a ship timing standpoint. So our end customers are primarily concentrated in the Southeast, but we can go anywhere with the multi-location fulfillment model, which is something else that I also like about the business. So yeah, and it was a brokered deal, so I got it through Business Broker. So,
You got it through a business broker? Okay.
yeah. Hmm.
You guys do, like, direct mail pieces and stuff like that for them too, or
We do, yeah. Well, we don't. Those are more of yeah, like those would be more of like a one-off project type of thing, but we don't have like necessarily a pre-packaged direct mail offering that somebody could like buy on their Print Authority portal. But we do direct mail. And
I was thinking of, like, multi-location, franchises. I came one of my previous businesses was a real estate investment firm, and a couple of buddies of mine or people I know, the family I know, they own one of the Home Investors franchises, and they're probably one of the higher producing ones. And they spend a ton on marketing, but to this day, I still get Home Investor postcards on my real estate properties, like
yeah,
because they mail to all high equity absentee owners. So if you don't owe much on your property, you have a low mortgage on it, and you're not living in it, your tax bill goes to something other than the property itself. It's how they identify it. They mail me a postcard probably every 6 months. Would you consider selling the property? And I thought, whoever's got that account, because that's a nationwide franchise, right? They're sending hundreds.
yeah, and I mean, look, I came from a marketing background doing primarily digital marketing, but of course I'm extremely biased given I'm in the print industry, but direct mail works. I mean,
Hmm.
like I think one of the challenges as a marketer in any industry or trying to sell products is cutting through the noise, and like digital is so noisy. So I mean, like everyone is producing, creating content for their brand and driving digital copy and media online. So it's extremely noisy and it's not free. I mean, I think there's like this perception that it's free to like just throw something online, and yeah, the cost of placement, if it's organic, if you're just creating a Instagram account, the cost of placing it is free, but you know, you still need to create the content. It has to be compelling content, so you either are doing that yourself or you're paying an agency. And then if you're doing paid, of course you're paying for the media placement, and a lot of these platforms now, if you want to get noticed at all, like you got to put paid media behind your digital copy. So you know, I think like I think it's not to say that digital is not important. I mean, I think it's obvious that the world has changed dramatically and it's key. But I think yeah, I mean, look, like I think print in general, like one of the things I'm struck by is just how large the total addressable market is in the commercial printing space. And then from a marketing standpoint too, I think print marketing, direct mail, and even like print media, while it's diminished in its significance and the role it plays, like it's still an effective way to reach consumers. And a piece of direct mail, it may sit on your kitchen counter or on your fridge or whatever for like weeks or months in some cases, or you just stick it in a drawer or whatever. If you're scrolling on your phone, you scroll, and if you don't engage with a piece of media, then you'll never see it again.
I built my real estate firm based off of direct mail. We bought foreclosed homes, people who are in financial distress, and distressed landlords. So basically, people who are, we would track things like evictions and all kinds of stuff. And we would just market to those people like they're having problems with their real estate of some sort. And 2 years after I sold that to my business partner, I still got calls going, "Hey, I still have your postcard on my refrigerator. Are you still interested in buying my house?" Right? So it worked, and we weren't high volume. I'd say our budget was probably 2,500 a month to 3,000 a month, and we sent a lot of mail. You figure probably about a buck and a quarter a letter after you pay for research and stamp and print and stuff.
Yeah, and of course, postage is getting more and more expensive too, which is unfortunately just a fixed cost for
Yeah,
both the
yeah.
printer and the consumer. So, but yeah, I mean, it's affordable. It's not, you know, crazy.
So how do you grow a print company? I mean, if you looked at your company right now, when you look at one of the things I always want to look at, partners with a group of people who are buying manufacturing. and they bought one that was running at 80%. They bring a new sales guy in, and all of a sudden they're at 100%, and they have to make some changes pretty quick because they're already at 100% manufacturing. They can't make no more, right? So now they're outsourcing some of the cutting and some of the other stuff. When you bought it, did you look at what is the capacity that the facility is running at? So do you have the capacity to grow?
I did, yeah, and I think like one of the biggest ways that we have capacity is through shifts. I mean, we're running our presses are running normal business hours, pretty solidly utilized during the workday, 40 hours a week, give or take. Big jobs going on more than that, but I think one of the biggest opportunities we have without investing a single incremental dollar except for the cost of producing material is to have and labor is to have another like a night shift or like go to a 24/7 sort of model or 24/6. So some printers do that. Obviously you got to have the work to do it. But yeah, I mean, I think sales, I spent quite a bit of time early on after closing and still do arguably, but just kind of brute forcing sales growth on my own and kind of taking on a lot of that work myself, which obviously, like I said, I learned a lot. But also I think like one of the things I'm coming to realize a little longer into my journey here is the best way to grow is through organizational development, to put systems and processes in place and to put the right people in the right positions and empower them to go drive the performance metric that you're going after. And that's just a much more scalable way to grow any business, I would argue. But yeah, I mean, I think in any sort of manufacturing context, which I would argue print is at its core sort of like a manufacturing operation, you're sort of inherently limited by space, people, and equipment. But I think it's probably one of the main reasons that people love software businesses. But I think in the software space that those businesses have their own sets of challenges and risks. So I think another thing that I've learned since becoming an entrepreneur full time, and honestly, like entrepreneurship has been such a great way to learn this lesson, is that like everything in life is just a series of trade offs. And whether or not you know what trade offs you're making in any particular situation and a decision you're making is you could or could not be aware, but you are making trade-offs inherently in everything that you do and in every activity that you pursue. So I think that like being an entrepreneur and being the sole owner of a business, it makes it very apparent and front and center, like who's responsible for bearing the consequences of the decisions that get made with the business's money. So it's just a very like tangible way to learn the fact that you're always making trade-offs. And for me personally, like I've gotten better at seeing it in like my personal life too. Like I have a wife and 20-month-old daughter and a son due in August. So we're busy young family, and I'm always making trade-offs there too, right? Like, and social life and all those sorts of things. So I think I've just gotten better at viewing every decision I make in life through this lens of what's the opportunity cost here. And I think entrepreneurship's been a really good way to learn that. So,
I laugh when you said that because you got a 20-month-old girl and I have an 8-year-old girl, and I know what's ahead of you. So my son's 13, he's super cool, I love hanging out with him, but my little girl has me wrapped around her pinky like a puppet on a string. She can just look at
yeah,
me and go, "Daddy, I wanna go to the beach," and I'm like, "Okay, I don't have anything else on my calendar today." There's lots of stuff
yeah,
I
yeah,
could be
yeah,
doing as a business owner, right? But she's
yeah, yeah,
like today she's off and I'm like I bribed her, it's like, "Look, you're really good. Let me do the recording without coming out and interrupting me, and then when we're done, we'll go to the beach." But it's just because she gave me the pouty eyes, so, look
yeah.
forward to
Well, heading back into the newborn stage later this year, my
Mhm.
wife and I were actually just talking about this earlier today. It's both exciting because you're like, oh wow, like that, we'll be able to appreciate like that they're only a newborn for so long, but it's also like terrifying because you're like, oh my god, like I know what I'm in for this time around. So it's gonna be rough.
I don't know how many adults that I've coached or been in business relationships with where if they just had a little more tenacity, a little more fearlessness, they would succeed so much better in life. And that's the one thing
Mhm.
I like as a parent, I know we're off topic here, but as an entrepreneur, you need that fire, you need that tenacity that I don't like being told no, and I'm gonna figure this out. So it
Yeah, I actually to bring it back to the topic, I talk to acquisition entrepreneurs all the time and people who are searching, and I love those conversations. And so I'm always happy to jump on the phone with someone. And I would say the biggest thing that I see holding people back is almost always like themselves and their willingness to pull the trigger and take a pretty significant risk and sort of take a gamble. It's almost never like somebody's intelligence or technical ability or work ethic. Like, I mean, I would say 99.9% of the searchers, certainly that I've talked to, have those things in spades, and
Mhm,
they don't, they've got plenty of skills and intelligence and all those things. It's just a matter of like, when push comes to shove, are you willing to go all in? And, I think not everyone is, and that's like totally fine and a valuable thing to learn about oneself too. So I think like one of the things I always talk to people about too is I think like just the process of searching for a business kind of forces you to confront a lot of those questions about what your risk tolerance is and kind of what you're comfortable with. Otherwise, for a lot of those questions, there's really only one way to find out. You got to explore it.
I've often thought so I have a couple full-time assistants, and I've often thought, like, I should put them on going out and finding me businesses to acquire because if nothing else, I think every employee ought to have to go through the realm of evaluating them. It teaches you some really cool things that would help you be a great employee too. Not only for the company you're working for, but for yourself and picking the right company to work for. The ability to read a
Hmm.
balance sheet to really and an income statement and look at cash flows of a business that you're thinking about to go into work for would be incredibly important. I don't know how many times, especially in the .com era, where I went to work for something and turns out the business was in a lot of trouble. I went to work for Excite, but a year and a half, almost 2 years before it went bust. Right? If I'd have got to keep my stock, I'd have had millions in stock. But unfortunately, right before my stock vested, they declared bankruptcy, and it was blocked from trading. So that said, I think if everybody just took the time to learn how to read a balance statement, how to read an income statement, how to understand cash flows. Now, not all businesses are gonna give you that, but all public businesses, you can just go get it, right? And
Hmm.
they truly understand who they're going to work for and how well that business is going. You could make better choices and actually run business, work for better businesses and potentially helping businesses improve better. So there is a skill to this that would benefit a broader spectrum than just acquisition entrepreneurs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny, I'm like kind of find myself reflecting on some of the things that I've learned that would have made me a much better employee. I mean, I'm glad I'm on the path that I'm on, but I think like one of the things is just like communication and the importance of like effectively communicating your ideas and doing so like in a repetitive manner that sort of just continues to, I guess, like the context I think about it now as a business owner is like is like getting people on board with changes or the growth strategy or the vision for the business and the importance of communicating that frequently, often, like having objective metrics that people can control and be held accountable for, like those kinds of things that I'm seeking as a business owner, because I want that like clarity between me and my team about what's driving performance here and like how can we continue to move these metrics in the right direction, and like how can I help you get there. And I feel like for a lot of my corporate jobs, like I never really spent enough time like getting super crystal clear about, okay, like what does success look like for this project that you're assigning to me, and then get like really super clear with your boss about what they want from an output standpoint, and then just like go make that happen and continue to like keep them in the loop about how it's tracking and like what you think, and ask for their kind of input to continue to redirect you in the right way. Like I kind of I didn't spend enough time like level setting and having those conversations with managers. I kind of just assumed like, oh, they'll see that I'm like doing a really good job on this and I'm working really hard. And for the most part, I was doing fine. But I do think those are the kinds of things that take you to the next level in any context in the business world. And it's taken me like being responsible for the P&L to sort of learn that, but certainly extremely valuable like skills to have gained.
There's a phrase I like to use. I use it internally. I don't think I've even ever brought it up to the employees, but it's called enrollment. So I refer to it as enrollment. So when you have a vision or a goal or something you want somebody to do, it's one thing to really communicate with them and to have them understand what you're looking for. But what I'm looking for when I say enrollment is they take it on as their own. They're enrolled they got your vision, they know where you're trying to go, and they're on board. They understand why, and they come up with ideas and other stuff. They bring stuff to you and go, "Hey, I know you're trying to hit this. We're doing X, Y, and Z, but what if we twisted this widget this way and drive, I know it's a X percent, 5% performance increase, right? But if you can really enroll people into the concept of where you're trying to go, and basically, I guess another word would be they're bought in. They buy into your vision. It's different than understand. There's a huge difference. Like you can understand something and not be on board.
Totally.
Yeah. There are a lot of people you've heard quiet quitting and all this stuff. There's a lot of people that quiet work. They come in and do exactly
Yeah.
what they think is expected of them. So part of that enrollment is changing that expectation is like, I expect us to grow. I expect you to improve upon your job. I expect you to get promoted. Right. So, and the way
Yeah.
you do that is here's our goals and here's my vision. Here's where I want to see us end up. Your job is to help me figure out a way to get there.
Yeah, no, totally. And the other thing I'm reflecting on as you're sharing that is like how much, and it sort of dovetails with another key lesson I've learned as an acquisition entrepreneur, like running a small business, is this sort of illusion of work life balance that I think I talk to a lot of people, or certainly read a lot online of folks who are interested in buying a small business because they'll be the owner and CEO of the business and they can take off whenever they want and kind of have the flexibility around their calendar. And I think at the end of the day, like, that is true, right? Like you do kind of get to make the final call, but as it relates to like leadership, getting buy-in for the vision, and then also like for me, what I've observed in terms of work-life balance is like you got to also recognize that like everything you do and say is sending a very clear signal to the team and the organization about the standard that you hold yourself to and you therefore hopefully expect of others. So yeah, I mean, can I like go blow off the rest of the afternoon and go play golf? Like, yes, but what message does that send to the team, right? Like we're busy and everyone's hustling in the back, like getting orders out the door. And I'm like, all right, I'm out. I'm going to go play golf. Now, sometimes like everyone needs time off and I'm all about providing flexibility. But again, it's sort of funny. Like again, I do observe a lot of people who are thinking like, oh, I'll just be the owner of the company and then I can just kind of coast on easy street and do whatever I want. It's like, you can, but like, if you do that, you're probably the business is not going to perform that well, so you may not have that company for too long. And then B, like, you're not going to be able to effectively lead an organization where your actions aren't setting the example for the organization, right? And so, like, as you were talking about, like getting enrollment, like the best way to get people to buy into your vision is for them to see clearly that you're bought in, and that that takes time and it takes consistent action over time for people to be like, okay, he's clearly serious about what he's telling us, so then maybe I'll be serious about it. But until, if it doesn't start with you, it's pointless anyway.
Yeah, I always tell people like because I get that a lot. I host meetings and hangouts for acquisition entrepreneurs. We just had one yesterday, and about 20 of them showed up. People, you're always invited. All my guests are invited. I kind of spotlight you guys when you come on in the hangouts because you've already done what a lot of the people are trying to do. But we have lawyers and acquisition entrepreneurs, people who've had massive exits, they show up to these things and hang out with the new guys, and we just exchange ideas, figure out where people are stuck, form joint partnerships and that type of stuff. But what people when they talk about buying something that for a passive income type of situation, my thing is you better really consider going above what you can do with an SBA loan, right? Because you need if you really want to do that, it's possible. I've seen it done, but you have to be big enough that if you're not gonna be the guy in there pulling as the most hours and be there when everybody shows up and be there when everybody goes home, you need to install that guy, and you need to be able to pay him correctly and incentivize him so, whether it's a general manager or CEO. But my rule of thumb is if you're not gonna be the true leader that that company needs to do that, you better be able to hire one, and then I just would say, "Don't show up." You manage that leader, and you manage him through personal meetings with him, and you manage them, but don't show up on a regular basis and be this lackadaisical owner because it will spread, right? I'm a
Mhm.
big believer in what you just said. If I'm looking for something, we're buying up manufacturing companies all over the world, and we're not the operators, right? I can't be. My team has operators in some of these facilities, but right now we're looking at Florida and Michigan. I'm not going to Florida or Michigan for more than a week or two at a time, so there has to be
Mhm.
a GM on the ground, but they're big enough, right? The things we're looking at are big enough that they can afford those people. And the employees, if they ever know me, they'll know me as an investor and the guy that does M&A stuff. They won't know me as
Yeah.
the guy that's in there running day-to-day operations. I have no business running day-to-day operations for the manufacturing. I could learn it, just like you learned the printing business. You probably hadn't had much experience running a printing business before you jumped in feet first.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's funny. I definitely like. I mean, I love having the investor mindset, and I
Mhm.
love like the idea of being an investor and looking at deals with people and like kicking around like thoughts about how to make a deal structure work. But I am like at my core an operator, and I so anyway, so I think like as it relates to my search journey, I was able to get comfortable with the business I bought. I mean, first of all, I would say like it was the relationship I had with the seller was great. I could tell he was a really high integrity individual. So I just felt like this is a really good business run by a really good person. And so that was like the biggest thing that I felt like the deal had going for it. But because people ask me like pretty frequently, like, how did you know? Like, how did you know this was the business you wanted to buy? And the answer is like, I didn't. I don't think you ever fully can. But I saw this, and I actually had a lot of fun putting the deal together, but I saw the search and deal structure part as like a necessary evil, and I wanted to skip to the operating part. So, and I still kind of like, again, like in my heart of hearts, feel that way. Like, I definitely am opportunistically open to pursuing a roll up and, thinking about kind of making other acquisitions in the print space and kind of trying to scale up that way as well. But at the end of the day, like I love operating, and so I got to lean into that too. So
And the world needs the operators, man. Like, I'm 52, I don't necessarily wanna be the operator for the next thing, right? I have a little pest control company I own, I'm not the operator for. I've got even this little thing I was showing you that we're starting with my wife and my son, I'm the advisor to, but I'm not the operator, they are. So, I just kinda gotta know your roles, like, know where your sweet spot is and know what you're really good at, and there's part of me that says I wish I was a great operator because every great business I've ever seen, you had a visionary and a guy who solves problems, and he's always partnered if it's doing really well with somebody who's really good at operations, the fine tuning the machine. And the ones that are
hmm
struggling, usually they're missing one of those two components. They either have two visionaries or two operators, right? If
yeah,
you look at
yeah,
like
yeah.
who's leading the organization. But I want to respect your time, and I know that we got a hard cutoff. Give people like two or three. First of all, give people 2 or 3 takeaways if they could just they don't know anything else from the show, if they can only remember 1 or 2 things from it. What would you want them to walk away as far as what you learned and lessons learned in this journey?
Yeah, I would say for me the value of, and you kind of hear competing pieces of wisdom on this in the search space, but oftentimes it's framed as like buying big versus buying small. And the company was doing about 2 million in revenue when I bought it. We'll do just north of 2.3 hopefully this year. But I am sort of in the camp of not buying like really, really tiny necessarily, but I definitely have gotten tremendous value out of getting in the game. So I do think there's a ton of wisdom in, not waiting for the SaaS business that's throwing off 1.5 million in free cash flow every year that has contract recurring revenue and that look, we all want to find that business that you can sit back and hire an operator and kind of sit back and watch your money grow. But I think there's a lot of people that are kind of like waiting for perfection as they're thinking about making an acquisition. So my advice on that is always to people like get in the game. Like it is really important to get experience operating. Like if you want to run small businesses, like the best way to learn how to run small businesses is not search for the perfect small business to buy. It's run a small business. So I think that is definitely like probably the biggest piece of unsolicited advice I would share. And then I think again, just like the importance of knowing your strengths and what you're good at and leaning into those. I saw a huge opportunity with this business in the sense that the previous owner was kind of like the classic search scenario where previous owner was looking to move on to the next chapter in life and get out of running the business full time, and so hadn't invested a lot of time and energy and money into sales and marketing efforts, and that's what I had spent my career doing. So I was like, I think I can add that to this business, and if I can learn all the other stuff, then I may have something here. So that's another reason I kind of like locked in on this one as a really good opportunity for me specifically, right? Like it wouldn't necessarily be the right opportunity for someone whose main growth lever is some sort of financial engineering sort of opportunity that they see. I certainly knew that coming into the search world, I wasn't that guy. I'm not like a private equity investor or a deal maker guy. I'm a marketing guy. So like for me, the right business is one that would benefit from a marketing guy owner. And so I think that the other like sort of the overarching, I guess, like takeaway or piece of advice is just like to know yourself and to lean into that. Don't try to do the same thing everyone else is doing, because your advantage is in your advantage, not in the other searcher's advantages. So
Awesome. That's great advice. How do people reach out to you if they want to work with you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
yeah, so you can find me on Twitter, X at Connor Pera, and then you can just look me up on LinkedIn, or you can shoot me an email, Connor, Connor, at theprintauthority.com.
Cool. We'll put that stuff in the show notes and we'll call that a show. Hang out for just a second afterwards. I want to announce our new channel partners, the ITX Marketplace. Since 1998, ITX has created $5 billion in value by selling more than 225 IT businesses in 20 countries. ITX works exclusively with IT-enabled businesses generating between 5 million and 30 million who are ready to be sold, and M&A decision makers who are ready to buy. For over 25 years, ITX has developed industry knowledge that helps determine whether a seller is a good fit for their buyers before making the match. ITX Mergers and Acquisition Marketplace we have partnered with has a proprietary database of 50,000 plus global buyers seeking IT service firms, managed service providers, Microsoft service providers, software as a service platforms, and channel partners with Microsoft, Oracle, ServiceNow, and the Salesforce space. If you have an IT-enabled business you're ready to sell, I want you to visit the itexchangenet.com/marketplace. How to exit. That link will be in the show notes. Visit them now.